If you dig exactly 8 feet straight down into your backyard right now, the dirt is sitting at a constant 55 degrees. It doesn't matter if it's 105 degrees outside and your condenser unit is screaming itself to death trying to keep your living room livable, that dirt is 55 degrees. And the $200 billion HVAC industry is absolutely terrified of you figuring out how to tap into that. Actually, terrified might be the wrong word. They're just structured entirely to make sure you never even think about it, because there's no recurring revenue in a hole in the ground. Hi, I'm Paul Chang. Over the next few minutes, I'm going to show you how a literal $3 piece of corrugated trash pipe can bypass your central air system and cool your house for exactly $0 a month in refrigeration costs. Look, we're getting price gouged on every single utility right now. If you're sick of writing a $300 check to the power company every July just to keep from sweating in your own kitchen, do yourself a favor and hit subscribe, because the passive cooling system I'm about to walk you through completely breaks their profit model. And I almost didn't believe it myself until I put my hand over the vent and felt the freezing air hitting my skin. You really have to understand how the HVAC cartel actually works to grasp why this is kept so quiet. It's not an industry built on cooling your home, it's an industry built on moving mechanical parts that inevitably break. Compressors, contactors, evaporator coils, control boards, they want you on that treadmill. You know that exact sound I'm talking about, that horrible buzzing, grinding hum from the metal box sitting outside your window when the compressor tries to kick on but the capacitor's dead. You're standing there sweating, staring at this piece of machinery, knowing it's going to cost you $400 just to have a guy in a branded van pull into your driveway. They have built an entire global economy on your desperation when the weather gets hot. And the goalposts are always moving. Remember a few years back when they forced everyone off R22 Freon? They said it was for the ozone, which, fine, maybe it was, but it also conveniently forced millions of homeowners to rip out functional units and buy entirely new $5,000 systems. And now they're doing it all over again, phasing out R410A for R32 refrigerants. It literally never stops. But thermodynamics doesn't care about their corporate business models. The ground beneath your feet is a giant infinite thermal battery. We're talking about ground tubes, or ground-coupled heat exchangers if you want to use the engineering term. But honestly, it's just burying a cheap piece of plastic. Wait, let me explain that better. It's not just burying any pipe, but the underlying concept is that brilliantly simple. Think about August. The sun bakes your asphalt roof to 140 degrees. You can feel the heat radiating through your attic ceiling like a physical weight pressing down on you. Your air conditioner fights that by taking a specialized gas, compressing it to an extreme pressure, blowing the heat outside with a loud fan, and expanding it to create cold. It takes massive, staggering amounts of electricity to force that phase change. But dirt is incredibly dense. It's heavy. Once you get down past the frost line, roughly 6 to 8 feet below the grass, the sun's radiant heat just can't penetrate it. The soil down there sits perfectly insulated, maintaining a constant 50 to 60 degrees 365 days a year. So instead of using a 4,000 watt compressor to artificially fight nature and chill 90-degree air, what if you just pulled that hot summer air through 100 feet of cheap corrugated plastic pipe buried deep in that cold dirt? As the heavy hot air travels through the pipe, the heat simply bleeds out into the surrounding earth. It's basic, undeniable heat transfer. By the time that air travels the length of the trench and comes out of the vent into your living room, it has naturally chilled to around 65 degrees. You aren't fighting nature, you're just moving air. The only electricity you pull is for a tiny intake fan that uses maybe 30 watts. That is less power than an old incandescent light bulb. I was standing in my buddy Dave's workshop down in Nevada last summer. The ambient air outside was 104 degrees. It literally tasted like hot dust and exhaust. We went into his uninsulated metal shop, and he had this plain 4-inch white PVC pipe coming right out of the concrete floor in the corner. No AC unit anywhere on the property. I put my bare hand over the open pipe, and the air blasting out was crisp. It smelled a little earthy, kind of like a clean, dry basement, but man, it was cold. My forearm instantly broke out on goosebumps. That was the exact moment I realized we have all been completely sold a lie. We're paying thousands of dollars for complex machinery to do what the ground does for free. Try asking a licensed HVAC technician about this and watch his face. He will instantly get defensive and start throwing building code violations at you. He'll say you can't do it, it's unsafe, the municipality will fine you. Because look at it from his angle. How does he mark up a trench? He can't charge you a 300% premium on a piece of agricultural drainage pipe you can buy at any local hardware store. There's no biannual maintenance contract for a plastic tube sitting in the dirt. But here's the catch, and it is a massive one that the DIY forums usually leave out until it's too late. You cannot just rent a backhoe, throw some cheap sewer pipe in the mud, cover it up, and expect to live in a free meat locker. In fact, if you use the wrong type of pipe, or if you lay it completely flat without understanding the thermodynamics of what actually happens to hot, humid summer air when it suddenly hits a 55-degree surface on the ground, you are going to create a literal biological weapon in your backyard. You will end up pumping pure, toxic black mold straight into your lungs. Figuring out how to put a pipe in the ground is the easy part. But dealing with the physical reality of condensation, that's where 99% of people completely ruin their homes and their health. And the fix for it is incredibly simple. But if you miss this one specific step, if you pull 90-degree, horribly humid summer air into a 55-degree plastic tunnel, it is going to sweat. Think about a glass of ice water sitting on your patio table in July. Within 3 minutes, the outside of that glass is dripping wet, leaving a puddle on the glass. That exact same physics happens inside that buried pipe. If you just lay 100 feet of PVC perfectly level in the dirt, that condensation pools in the belly of the pipe. It sits there in the dark. In a week, it smells like a wet dog. In a month, you are cultivating black mold and blowing it directly into your family's living room. So the actual physical execution of this takes a little bit of sweat equity, but the math is incredibly simple. You go down to the rental yard and grab a walk-behind trencher or a mini excavator. You're going out into the yard in the blazing sun. You're going to smell the diesel exhaust from the machine. Your boots are going to be completely caked in heavy clay or topsoil, and you are going to carve a trench roughly 6 to 8 feet deep. That's your frost line sweet spot. You need about 100 feet of length to give the hot air enough physical time to transfer its heat into the cold earth. Now you go buy solid, smooth wall corrugated pipe or thick PVC. Do not, and I really mean this because I learned this the hard way helping a guy in Arizona, do not buy the perforated French drain pipe with the little slits in it. Groundwater will seep in and your brilliant cooling tube instantly becomes a mud-filled septic nightmare. Actually, let me back up a second. Let me be really specific here because this is the single point that ruins the whole project. You have to grade the trench. When you lay that pipe down in the dirt and you're gluing the joints together, smelling that harsh chemical burn of the purple PVC primer, you have to make sure the pipe has a 1 or 2% downward slope heading away from the house. It needs to lead to a simple gravel sump or a drainage pop-up at the far end. That way, when the air inevitably sweats, the liquid water physically rolls down the plastic and drains safely into the earth, completely harmlessly. The inside of the pipe stays bone dry. The air stays crisp. But here's the friction point that nobody on the off-grid permaculture blogs ever actually talks about. Air is heavy. It's a physical mass, a fluid. You are trying to drag a massive column of dense air through 100 feet of underground tubing. If you just slap a cheap $20 bathroom exhaust fan at the end of that pipe inside your house, it is going to violently choke. I tried it once on a prototype build. You turn it on, the cheap little motor makes this high-pitched, pathetic whining sound, the plastic housing gets physically hot to the touch, and it burns out its own bearings in 48 hours because it absolutely cannot handle the static pressure. It's exactly like trying to suck a thick, frozen milkshake through a 100-foot-long coffee server. You need serious, sustained vacuum pull. To actually make this work, to get that freezing rush of air physically hitting your face when you walk into the kitchen, you have to use a high CFM mixed flow inline duct fan. It's a very specific type of cylindrical fan used in commercial greenhouses and server rooms that is heavily engineered to pull heavy, dense air over incredibly long distances without overheating. It still runs on pennies a day, but it has the torque to literally vacuum that cold air out of the earth and blast it into your home. And because you are dealing with underground air, you can't just guess if it's safe to breathe. You have to know. You need a continuous digital humidograph and radon detector mounted right at the indoor intake vent. It completely takes the guesswork out of the equation. You look at the digital readout, you see the humidity is sitting at a perfectly safe 45%, you see the air is clean, and you know for an absolute fact the system is working perfectly. You have to treat the air like a raw material you're managing. Once you have that solid airflow, the feeling of standing over that floor register is genuinely unreal. It smells faintly like a clean, dry spring morning after a rainstorm, and the temperature drop is so aggressive you might actually need to put on a sweater in the middle of a heat wave. It feels like absolute freedom. You are literally stealing the cold right out of the earth. But if this is so cheap and so incredibly effective, why isn't every single new house built with an earth tube pre-installed? Why did my local zoning board actually threaten to red tag a buddy's property when the inspector saw the intake pipe sticking out of his lawn? It goes way deeper than just the HVAC guys wanting their cut. There is a specific weaponized legal mechanism they use to actively suppress this. It all comes down to a few buried sentences in the International Residential Code, specifically the sections governing approved mechanical ventilation. If you actually sit down and read the code book, and I mean the heavy, glossy 300-page binder that smells like a law library, it doesn't outright ban earth tubes. It just requires that any system modifying indoor air temperature must meet specific testing standards created by, you guessed it, the exact same industry consortiums that manufacture $5,000 heat pumps. So when a city inspector walks onto your property holding his little clipboard, he isn't looking at the undeniable math of thermodynamics. He's looking for a metal nameplate with a UL listing and a corporate logo he recognizes. If he just sees a raw 6-inch PVC pipe coming out of the ground with a wire mesh screen over it, his brain short circuits. He'll slap a neon red stop work tag on your door so fast your head will spin, citing unregulated air infiltration or severe radon liability. Wait, actually, the radon thing is a legitimate concern depending on your bedrock, which is exactly why I told you to continuously monitor the air earlier. But the building departments use it as a blanket excuse to kill the whole concept entirely. They have systematically legislated free passive cooling out of existence by making the engineering approval process so incredibly expensive and bureaucratic that no contractor will ever suggest it. They desperately want you hooked to the grid, paying the utility company a premium every July, and calling the licensed repair guy every time a $20 capacitor blows. But here is the reality of the situation on the ground. You don't need their permission to dig a trench in your own backyard for landscape drainage. You don't need a mechanical permit to plug a low-wattage inline greenhouse fan into a standard wall outlet in your own basement. When you finally get this system dialed in, when you seal that final PVC joint, wipe the sticky purple primer off your hands, and flip the switch on that blower, it changes everything. You stand there listening to the low, quiet hum of the motor, feeling this massive volume of heavy, chilled, 65-degree air physically pouring over your boots while the rest of the neighborhood is trapped inside, listening to their metal compressors screaming in the afternoon heat. You realize you just stepped completely outside their profit loop. You are literally using the raw, physical mass of the planet to bypass the electrical grid. It takes one brutal weekend of sweating in the dirt with a shovel, but you will never, ever look at an air conditioner the same way again. If you want to stop bleeding cash to these utility monopolies and start actually owning your own infrastructure, you need to start looking at the ground under your feet. Subscribe to the channel because next time I'm going to show you exactly how they are lying to you about your water heater. Stay safe out there.